What's up, everyone? Welcome to the Metal Maniacs Podcast. I am your host, Jay Ingersoll, and I'm here with my co-host, as always,
Mod.
He's here. Good morning, Mod. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm glad to be here.
Good, man. I'm glad to be here, too. So today we have a topic episode for you. We are going to talk about basically the top 5 albums that shaped us. And in no way could we put these in any order from 1 to 5. These are just influential albums on us. So throughout the years, numerous albums have left a profound impact on me during my journey through the realm of metal music. Nominating a mere 5 is an arduous task, yet the following quintet holds a special place in my heart. As I've immersed myself in them repeatedly, these are the albums that continue to call me to revisit them time and time again, even in the present day. The resonance has not waned, rather than persistently influenced both my guitar playing and my present-day musical preferences. Perhaps my youthful susceptibility played a role shaping my receptivity to these works. Nevertheless, I firmly believe that these albums remain at the pinnacle, withstanding the test of time and aligning with contemporary death metal standards, which I absolutely do. I feel like these albums hold up to anything that's out, even though the technicality has gone further beyond the production, the tightness, but these albums right here, us speaking on them, are just ones that really left an impression on me. So, my musical tastes have evolved. These records remain etched within me, firmly ensconced in my personal pantheon. Not a solitary lackluster track exists across these albums. If by chance you have yet to experience these auditory marvels, I implore you to go listen to them now. So, with that being said, I listen to hip-hop music sometimes too, and there's always a shitty song or two, even with the best hip-hop. I listen to metal by albums, and
agreed.
It's one of those things where it's there's not a bad song on these albums that I'm going to speak of. I listen to them front to back. There's not really a skipper. There's not really this one sucks. So that's why these albums are so important to me. So, this might be a multiple series because narrowing it down to 5 is it's not a task that we could really, we had to pick 5 and we're just picking 5 out of the many. And you'll definitely see we're going to have a honorable mentions list, and that might span into a series of multiple episodes after that. So let's delve into our first segment of our impressive series, the Paramount 5 albums that have indelibly marked our musical journey. So come to find out, Nick copied me on this.
God damn it.
He's like, I'm not putting into work. That sounds good, Jay. No, I'm totally kidding. No, it's just that we've been influenced by some of the main things, the main albums, the main bands, and it just happens to be that our list is very, very similar, but it also makes for a fun discussion, and I will speak upon my first album, and then we'll have you comment on yours. And it sounds like the first 3 that I have in line are pretty much the first 3 that he has in line. Like I said, keep in mind, these albums are in no particular order. They're just the way I wrote them down. So
yeah, it's it's as if we've known each other for 30 years. So go figure.
And started our CD collection at the same time, picking out the same CDs and shit. But still kind of funny after all this time. It's the same shit. So no surprises here, bud. All right. So the first album, we have actually visual representation here from Nick. Symbolic by Death. So Symbolic is the 6th studio album dropped on March 21st, 1995, courtesy of Roadrunner Records. They went ahead and remastered and reissued it on April 1st, 2008. Now, let me tell you, this album hits a sweet spot for me. Misanthrope, Empty Words, and Zero Tolerance, those are the tracks that really get me going. I mean, like I said, all of the tracks on there are amazing. Those are just 3 I wanted to pick out. So if you're listening to this podcast and you're like, I want to go check this out real quick, those are the 3 I would just say you can get a decent idea of what's going on with those tracks.
Yeah. For me, I would say put the album on and press play from track 1. That's my attitude about that album. But if I had to pick several off of it, I definitely agree with Misanthrope is one of my favorites. And everybody's big on Crystal Mountain. I think that is a good representation of that entire album just in one track.
Yeah, we could go on and on because I love Perennial Quest too, just the way it ends and the questions asked and the lyrics and everything. But so I'll never forget the first time I got hit by the Symbolic train. my buddy Nick, which is sitting right here across from me, he played it for me, actually, and I don't remember how that session began. I don't know if you had it already or what, and...
Columbia House. I probably had everything already.
Yeah, I know you had a lot of stuff, and I was kind of catching up to you when it came to the extreme metal or whatever, but, it really struck me. The sound was crystal clear, the songwriting had a razor sharp edge, and the riffs, man, they stuck with me. You can turn it off and the riffs are still stuck in your head. I mean, that just makes for a great riff. And what it did for me is it really solidified Death as one of my all-time favorite bands. It was like time to dive into their other albums and really start fucking with this band like heavy. So, and I was already, privy to Death before. I heard the individual thought patterns and like caught Philosopher video because I had like this compilation of like video on VHS, and that was one of them on there. Like, I don't know if it was like a Roadrunner comp or it was just a bunch of different videos. Might even been like a Headbangers Ball thing, but I remember seeing that video, like, and it was really cool, but it was something about Symbolic that really like kind of etched this album, for me into like one of the greatest albums I've ever heard. So, let's see.
So for me, I had not heard anything before Symbolic. I had just been reading like reviews, seeing the band name, seeing like a little description of the album, and similarly, to Chuck and his coming up with extreme music, I was just looking for the next heavy thing. Like, okay, I've heard Rust in Peace, and I've heard and Justice for All, and these are the heaviest things I can find. Pantera's kind of coming up at this time too, and you've heard about all the Pantera that there is over and over again. And so I'd take a chance on this stuff. If it wasn't noise, I'd say let's go. And when I first heard Symbolic, I was like, this is exactly what I'm looking for. This is just like some of the other things I already have that I'm listening, but even heavier, even meaner. And I was won over immediately. And just like you, I had to go out and buy the entire back catalog, as soon as I had the money, whatever, chump change I had at that age, 15, 16 years old, whatever, there's not a lot of money. So
right.
I definitely went out and
doesn't come fast.
Yeah. Every dollar and dime that I earned was pretty much sunk into the back catalog of Death immediately upon listening to Symbolic.
And with our previous episode, our Death series, and us talking about Death almost every episode now for 8 episodes, it's probably no surprise to anybody that an album would end up on our top 5 albums that shaped us, and this album, as far as like favorite, it's got to be tied with 3 of their other albums for my favorite, because it's hard to just pick one, but this one left an impression on me. It kind of opened the door for me. It really, was one that was memorable, and like you said, it was just like what I was actually looking for, and then it was easy to get into some of the other stuff and then take it for what it was, because every Death album is... Although it is Death, it is different, right?
Yeah,
there's like a
I would
different
agree.
vibe, right? So.
Yeah, 100%. Each album has its own evolution.
All right, cool. So as far as Nick goes, I mean, that's one of his albums too, so we don't really have to dive in. Is there anything else you want to speak about that album, brother? Or
no, that's pretty much what I had to say on it.
Okay,
I mean,
cool.
it is one of the all-time greatest, melodic death metal albums. So, I would say if you haven't heard this album yet, like, go back and listen to it. I know it's a little bit older, I mean, I get that it's older now in terms of how long it's been out, but I like older music too still. Like, I like Black Sabbath, I like Led Zeppelin, I like Thin Lizzy, Boston, and Journey, and things of the like. So I'd say even for current metalheads that haven't had the chance to listen to much of the work by Death, maybe start with Symbolic and go from there, because that's a great jump-in point for anyone, and it's a good representation of what the band sounds like front to back over their entire career. I think it still has that edge, that mean death metal sound to it, and it's also extremely melodic, and the songs are very well written, and great jump-in point for Death.
Yeah, just don't expect that from Scream Bloody Gore or Leprosy.
No.
If you listen to the Death series, we speak on that. So
start with Symbolic.
Yeah. So all right, the next album on both of our lists by chance is Carcass Heartwork. So released back in '93 in the UK by Earache Records, and then '94 in the US by Columbia Records. This was their major label debut. Now, I wasn't really into the Carcass train until my buddy Nick, sitting across from me once again, introduced me to them. But when I heard Heartwork, I was floored. The mix of groove and grind, and then there was like a bluesy solo aspect to it. So it's like the same with almost the Death thing. Like if you listen to older Carcass compared to like a Heartwork, like you're going to be like, is this the same band almost, But the lyrics shifted from their usual kind of medical and dark death themes to tackle stuff more like religion and death in a different aspect, not like dissecting bodies and feeding them to whatever. It's more of a kind of a I guess I don't really know what the word I'm looking for, but like more of it's just a different way to think about it, the way they wrote about death. So like this Mortal Coil, for example, and then Embodiment are they're two of my standout tracks, and this album was my gateway drug into Carcass, and then I went back to explore their grindcore roots. But Heartwork, again, like Symbolic, it was kind of a stepping stone between their grindcore past and then almost their rock-inspired album Swan Song that they put out before they disbanded for some years, and then they've come back around. We will talk, I'm sure, in the future more about Carcass because the band has inspired both of us and is such an important band to us. But yeah, Heartwork, that comes in at a number 2, not that we're numbering anything, but just number 2 on this particular list.
Yeah, and same as Symbolic, I might have even ordered these albums at the exact same time. I wouldn't be surprised if they arrived within a month of each other in my world, even though they weren't exactly released near each other. When I was looking for that heavier next thing, I saw Carcass Heartwork, and I saw the album art, and I was like, it didn't really grab me as, something that I was looking for. But again, just kind of trusting some of the reviews, the comparisons, the 4 fans of,
okay, yeah.
Like just kind of going off of what was in the descriptions. I thought, well, these things are basically pennies on the dollar to order, so let's go for it. And man, I put this thing in, and immediately I was pummeled, like right away. Again, just similarly to Symbolic, track 1, press play, Buried Dreams, boom. I am I am your fan, like immediately in 2 seconds. And this thing doesn't stop. The train doesn't stop until the very end, Death Certificate. Just a great album. It's a perfect representation of all of their work, front to back, where they would go, even Swan Song and then forward. Like there's rock blues elements in this album,
yeah,
and there's also some of that, just a touch of that grind from previous works.
Yep.
But again, great songwriting, very melodic, super heavy and fun. And then lyrics, with respect to the lyrics and the content, the previous stuff was more like for shock and gore, and I think they shifted tones with Heartwork to represent more feelings that they wanted to get out personally. I know that Bill and Jeff are both like, vegetarian, so they take an approach, the food industry in tongue-in-cheek ways in their lyrics and how, we consume farm animals and such. So I think there's a lot of that behind, and there was some religious elements too with like Embodiment. So, and several other of Jeff's lyrical pennings.
Yeah, for sure.
So yeah, but Carcass Heartwork, definitely number 2, all-time great. Not to rank, but alongside Death and Symbolic and the rest of these, like I can't recommend it enough.
yeah, for sure. All right, so moving on to number 3. Next in line, we got Morbid Angel's Domination, another one of Nick's pick as well. So back in 95, this album dropped as their 4th studio effort. It's kind of funny, we're picking a lot of like middle studio efforts at this time, Obviously, these bands have, well, minus Death, have had quite a catalog afterwards. But so it was their swan song under Giant Records before they switched back to Earache Records. I had a taste of Morbid Angel from Covenant, and I totally dug it, but Domination hit differently. The layers on it, the groove, tracks like Inquisition, Burn With Me, just a fucking heavy groover right there. Caesar's Palace, another one, and Nothing But Fear, they resonate with me. And even their edgy vocals had a commercial sheen at this point where they weren't so low and kind of, that you kind of almost could understand what they were speaking on, but like this almost had more of a clean sound, but still rough in the death metal realm. And then I still spin this album all the time, and I still like a lot of the Morbid Angel catalog. I just listened to the newest one, which is 6 years old now, but nothing quite matches what this album did, because Covenant was great. You seen the Beavis and Butthead, the bow, when they were making fun of it. So I like kind of knew about Covenant from there or whatever, but just something about Domination was just the pinnacle of Morbid Angel to me, really.
Again, another album for me. Just put it on and press play. The first two songs just grab you and slap you and own you. I love both of those songs so much. I almost always want to hear them together, one after the other. I want to hear David Vincent's growl carry over from Domination and just taper off enough into Where the Slime Live, like every single time. I want that riff to be the next thing I hear coming out of that growl. There's no replacement for the space in between that growl and what should be next. It's that song track too. And another one that I can listen to front to back. You mentioned Caesar's Palace. Hate Work is another one.
Oh yeah.
I mean, there's just every song on it is worth the listen. And This Means War. Oh man, I have so many memories of cruising around and listening to this one. And I think when you talk about middle of the collection type records, they were peaking. All of these guys were at that age, and they knew what they were doing. They'd been in the studio before, and they had refined their sound very well. And this is a great production in terms of album quality too, by Morbid Angel in the studio. So I would say it a little heavier than the other two albums still, though, like just even heavier.
Oh yeah
just
groove wise,
slower, more doom, it felt more guttural, more visceral even still, and just I would say still melodic though.
Oh yeah, still melodic. Whereas Formula's Fatal to the Flesh that came after that, I had such high expectations, and it was just kind of all over chaotic. Nothing stuck with me, and I think that was they changed members and like David Vincent leave after that, so it was kind of, and then Steve Tucker came in after that, so it was kind of one of those things where it's like then they went to Gateways, which I wrote off for a while, but that kind of almost brought some of that Domination back, but they must have figured out that chaotic Formula's Fatal to the Flesh formula didn't, for lack of a better term, didn't really work out so well probably as far as a listener, because they're probably like, what the fuck was this? I was kind of expecting some Domination groove and some songwriting like that, because the songwriting was great on it. Even their wanky little fucking keyboard stuff in between was actually cool and melodic to me too, whereas like down the road it got a little weird, but like everything just fit together perfectly on that. Like you see the artwork, you listen to the songs, and it's just like this thing that fits as a piece of art to me, right?
Yeah, and even those tracks, those little minuets or instrumental tracks between the songs, they're fun, they're captivating. Yeah, I listen to the layers peel back. Just you can hear different things, especially if you put the headphones on. So they were taking their time, crafting those things as well in the studio, giving the listener, just a little bit of a break from all of the chaos. I think those bands were kind of hip to that idea, just giving the listener a little bit of breath and space. Like, it is a lot to take in. You need just to sit down and listen to 60 minutes of unrelenting death metal is a lot to expect. So I think doing things like that really help an album and a listener enjoy the whole thing. Like, oh, what's next?
For sure. All right, so moving on, this is where the list starts to split a little bit, where Nick and I have differing 4 and 5s on the list, but that makes it cool. So for me, it's At the Gate, Slaughter of the Soul. It hit the scene in 95, redefining melodic death metal. I stumbled upon it when the art caught my eye at Believe in Music, which was like an old record store around here. I just thought the artwork was cool. I knew nothing about At the Gates. I was in math class the next day with my headphones, my fucking CD, what do they call those? Walkman, right? And then Discman, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, thank you. And then I listened to it in there, and I don't even remember math class, because I remember like, what the fuck? It just blew my mind. Like, literally, I was like, holy fuck, this is the shit. So it was like it was a mix of death metal and thrash.
A lot of thrash.
Yeah. but it was so melodic and just the next level for me of pummeling. And tracks like Cold and Under a Serpent Sun with the melodicism of it was just insane to me. Gothenburg sound, this album defined it, and still to this day people are trying to catch that sound. Even At the Gates themselves are trying to replicate what they did on this to some extent. And I was craving more after the album got done. I was like, man, this thing's too short. I need like 12 more songs, right?
It is short.
But it was a game changer for death metal, and for me, and At the Gates, it had me hooked. This was the band's last effort before disbanding, before they resurfaced again in 2011. So it was kind of like almost after that they split up. There was no more, nothing else to listen to. But I just remember at that time, holy shit, that thing was pummeling, and just such a badass album. Really introducing me to like the Gothenburg sound,
While not in my top 5, definitely an album that I enjoyed and I listened to alongside you and at the same time in life. And I just remember it being super fast. Like for me, it was like, oh man, it had some groove to it, but it reminded me a lot of just thrash metal, only now with Thomas Lindberg on vocals. So I was, definitely hip to it. I already liked thrash metal.
Oh yeah.
And this album, I mean, again, definitely their peak work. And I think that they've been very genuine about replicating that sound since, coming back together. And I think they've done some great work. I own both of I think it's just two efforts, if I'm not mistaken.
Yeah. I think The Night We Drink or the Nightmare that is.
Yeah, I have
something or another. Yeah,
I have 2 albums since then, and they're both great albums. I enjoy them thoroughly. But yeah, if you're gonna sit here and speak to the name At the Gates, Slaughter of the Soul is definitely their peak work, and I love that album, and I I co-sign on this as a top 5 all timer.
Yeah. So in 2018, they came out with To Drink from the Night Itself.
Okay.
And then 2021, The Nightmare of Being are the 2 albums that basically came after that. So
yeah, both good albums.
They were good albums. I don't know maybe I was expecting Slaughter of the Soul. Maybe I was expecting Slaughter of the Soul to the Second Power. I don't know, but still great albums, still awesome band, and on my bucket list of bands I fucking need to see because I don't have many, but they're one of them. So
I'll have to pursue that myself. Yeah, The Nightmare of Being, great album. I do really appreciate that one, by the way.
All right, so what do you got, Nick?
If we want to jump to my next album, I will keep it in the same country.
Okay.
I do believe that In Flames.
Okay.
Also from Sweden, correct? I don't know if they were from the same exact city or how they all came together. But in my top 5, I would go with The Jester Race.
Okay.
In Flames, definitely one of those bands that if you jump in anywhere, it might not sound like any other album. And this, by all accounts, is an earlier effort, a very early effort. And not a lot of the stuff after this is going to sound very similar. A couple of albums maybe, and then they're going to really start to divert, go away from this sound. But
yeah,
for me, it's like on this even, it's like the acoustic guitars and just the depth of the melody between the 2 guitars. As I mentioned, I like things like with the twin guitar melodies like Boston, Thin Lizzy, and this has that feel on steroids, like to the tune of death metal and Anders Frieden screaming over it. It's so rich in melody, and it's just heavy enough too where it counts. And out of all of these albums, probably one of the most upbeat.
Yeah.
And in, I would say, major keys, giving off like almost happy vibes.
Yeah.
Like you feel like you're just kind of triumphant and just in stride. Like there's just a swagger to it, and I think that gives it enough bite to where it's not just happy. Like there's some death metal to it for sure. I mean, that's why it's on this list. This is an extreme metal album for sure.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And it goes in very heavy. But again, when we were speaking to like giving albums a little bit of space, this one has a lot of space on it, a lot of instrumentals, a lot of room to take a breath, chill out, calm down before they steamroll you with another slapper just, along the way. So a good bit of music for anybody who wants to, clean the house and get things done. I think there's a lot of energy on this album, and it's definitely one of my all-time top 5 greatest metal albums.
This album made my honorable mentions because we'll go through those, and maybe, like I said, we might have another. This might be a good series to continue because we have so many. But this definitely made my honorable mentions because it's made such an impact on me. I just remember, like, I think it's track 2 or whatever with acoustic guitar in between the heavy guitar, and that was the first time like you heard a little Slayer stuff do that before. But when I first heard that, I was like, okay, this is a whole different take. It was like, and yes, they are from Gothenburg as well, so it's just one of those things where it's just like the melody mixed with the heavy, and there was enough compare and contrast where it just wasn't pummeling you all the way from beginning to end, but there was catchy hooks and riffs, and they were starting to really write songs. Because if you go to the albums before this, it was that raw kind of Swedish metal. It was melodic, but this is just really kind of where they hit their stride as far as this type of death metal goes. Because like you said, if you go on to like Horacle and then Clayman, where they just start clean singing, and there's a lot of other elements starting to be added after that. So
yeah. I would say in terms of the melody here too, it wasn't very gimmicky or just used as intros or outros. It was really infused with the songwriting. It was something that you could kind of count on the direction of the song going at any moment. So it wasn't just, you know, instrumentals here and there or intros here and there. I felt like it was part of the entire album. The ebb and flow of the whole album was very instrumental, in addition to it being very, very heavy. So
nice. All right, so rounding out my list at number 5 is going to be Soilwork's Chain Heart Machine. This was their second album after Steel Bath Suicide, or the way I worded that was kind of weird, but it's their second album, and it's the album after their first full album, Steel Bath Suicide. Right, so to me, it was Slaughter of the Soul on steroids. Faster, more melodic, and laced with killer solos, something that the At the Gates effort didn't have as many solos. There was a couple in there, but as far as like the guitar work, the intensity of these melodies mixed with like powerful grooves, because this thing is grooving too. It's thrashy, but it's grooving, and like there's a little bit of like keyboards in there, so like it hit in a completely different way than music I've heard before, because the keyboard is subtle enough to make that full and atmospheric, and you almost can't even hear it, but it just adds so much to like these riffs and grooves. So Possessing the Angels, Machine Gun Majesty, and Neon Rebels are the standouts. Not to take anything away from the other songs, because the same with all of these albums that we spoke on, every song on these albums are great, but to me, Soilwork was on to something huge on this one. They later introduced clean vocals, keeping the momentum going strong. Chain Heart Machine is etched into my metal-loving chain heart forever. So, you know, I don't really know what else to say about this. Listen to this album if you're into extreme metal, or you just want something to fucking slap you in the face but also be melodic at the same time. And just, it fucking rips. And even when they get heavy and groovy, it fucking rips. And that's all I can say about Chain Heart Machine.
Yeah, this one is probably maybe one of the heaviest on the list, and I think it represents, you know, such a good moment in death metal. I mean, they kind of come on late. I mean, much later, right? The start of their career is kind of like after all of the other albums we've talked about.
Oh, yeah,
right?
yeah, a little bit later. I mean, they've still been around, but yeah.
Yeah, so they kind of capitalize on all of this work that's kind of come before them, but man, they do such a great job. You know, some people maybe don't reinvent the wheel. Now, Soilwork did go on to like almost reinvent themselves, you know, and they have a very diverse catalog as well. But when you speak to this one, I'd say that, you know, it's one of the heaviest albums of all time, even. I mean, it's just, it's heavy. It is not one that I listen to as much as the others on the list, but I own it and I've listened to it, and you're right. I mean, you can sit down and listen to this whole thing, and for as heavy as it is, maybe not even as melodic or as it doesn't have as much space on it as I recall. It's a chainsaw the whole time.
Oh, yeah.
Just cutting down the whole forest, and it's brutal, but it's a good one. There are some very catchy rhythms on there, and highly recommend. Soilwork in general, there's a lot of good places to go with them.
They have their catalog is. I pretty much love like everything I've heard of Soilwork. The only one I didn't really care for was the figure number 5. I couldn't really get into that one. That was like where they almost got their softest. They almost started almost like trying to reach that corporate, like kind of where like All That Remains went, like just the same kind of song structures with the same effects and everything. Like But then they kind of came back with stabbing the drama, I believe, right after that, and then they went back heavy again, and then they went and started mixing up things again. So it's like Soilwork is just a fucking awesome band.
Yeah, definitely check them out. Chain Heart Machine, though, for an extreme metal lover, that's going to be the one. Rounding out my top 5. Now this one's a tough one to spit. This was a tough sell for me.
We're gonna have to bleep this out.
Yeah, my dad didn't appreciate this one.
He's like, "What the fuck is this kid?"
Yeah, this one wasn't a favorite in the household, and it's definitely one of those moments where I wouldn't have called my band this. I wouldn't have called my band. I wouldn't have personally called my band this. But this effort here, this album, Triarchy of the Lost Lovers by the band Rotting Christ. I mean, obviously, the name itself of the band puts a lot of people off immediately. Just kind of like, that's got to be dumb. That's got to be like the worst sounding garbage just based on that band name. But, again, if you give, enough time to, read the descriptions, what they're comparing it to, what's being said about it, who's saying this about it, who recorded it, where it was recorded, all these things, You're like, okay, I'll roll the dice, I'll gamble. And again, a band with a pretty diverse catalog, but this one is so rich in melody. I think that's one of the biggest things for me is there's melody on melody for days on this. And when I sit down and listen to this album, I am immediately teleported to like the dead of winter, the coldest day of the year, and you're not dressed warm enough no matter what you tried to do. It is that, and it goes right to the heart and soul. Like, it is just a hard album to listen to. It's kind of sad.
Oh, it's a sad album.
It's a very sad album. I think the reason they titled it as they did, the album, was they lost a member. Now, he didn't pass away, but he just, quit the band and moved on. And they were sad about it. They just felt like they lost a brother, and it was kind of hard for them to go forward. And that was kind of like the feeling of that album, is just missing, the element that was. And they put forward a really stout effort with this one. It is heavy. It's got some moments on it. It's definitely got some songs on it that get you up and go. But for me, it's songs like Snowing Still, Diastric Alchemy.
Yeah, that's a sweet song.
Archon is a good heavy hitter. This album, to me, just the melody, and just when I first heard it, I thought, wow, this is not representative of the band name at all.
Oh yeah, exactly.
Like,
I was just going to speak on that myself, and
I wish they had a different band name just so that I didn't have to like tell people, oh yeah, by the way, you need to check out this band Rotting Christ. Like,
yeah, they're like, what?
Fuck. Like, I hate having to tell people I like that band, but I really do. At least, that album, they've got some other good work, but this one is definitely my favorite, and I would recommend it. If you can get past the band name, sit down, get cozy by the fire, put a blankie on, and sip some wine, and put the mood lighting on, and yeah, it's gonna be some guitars coming at you, but it's good. I'd say read the lyrics, and they're on the poetic side, and they're definitely forlorn, but I love this album, and it definitely is gonna go in my top 5 metal albums of all time, especially with respect to it being extreme. Little bit of a different vocal. Both the In Flames and the Rotting Christ album have really like drippy, wet, hard to grasp vocals. Like, you're not getting one audible word out of these guys. Basically, it's pretty like very slurry, and it runs together. Now, Anders would go on to enunciate more over time, but with the Rotting Christ, you got to kind of read along. It's pretty hard, and I think some of the accent creeps in more with those guys versus some of the other foreign acts. Like, it's not as noticeable. But with that band, you definitely want to sit down. Any of this stuff, you want to sit down and read the lyrics. You're not getting a damn word out of it. David Vincent did a good job. Chuck did a pretty good job, of enunciating the words. But yeah, I would say any of these albums, the whole intention is to like sit down and consume it front to back. In addition to maybe whatever else you might do while listening to music, working out, showering, doing chores. Right. Some of this stuff is, for me, I would say sit down and enjoy it on its own merits. Just listen to the music, read the lyrics, look at the art, think about what's being said to you and take, your time and imagine where the melodies are going and taking your mind. So yeah, this one for me, top 5 all time.
Cool. As far as I go with that, I remember listening to it and being like, this don't sound like Rotting Christ. Like, you know what I mean? Like, because
Right.
it's like very melodic. It's almost slow. Like overall, it's even like the fast stuff is slow compared to
Sure.
especially like Chain Heart Machine. That's 200 BPM just fucking slamming your ears, where this is just like a slow, steady drift on a horse riding through the wintry forest kind of like to me.
Right, yeah,
It's
right.
just, but at the same time, the songwriting was great. The melodies were great, stuff that stuck in your head. And I think that goes to speak on all these albums where the songwriting is great.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's not a fucking riff salad. It's not like trying to be something it's not. It's like, this is where it's at. And as far as Riding Christ goes, I've listened to some other works. I have a few of their other albums, and nothing just kind of quite struck me like this. I feel some of their older stuff is a little more black metal, a little more where it meets the Riding Christ name, so I can kind of see, but it's just kind of an evolution. And then if you go after that, the next one was the Dead Poem, something like that, right?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And that one was pretty good, but it just wasn't that. So it was like, that was one of those albums of a band that, like, with these other bands, like, there's a lot of other stuff that I loved and consumed, not so much with the Riding Christ. Not saying it was bad, it just didn't hit me like that album. So
Yeah, again, another band very diverse in their catalog, so you might not like anything else. You might not even like that album as much.
Right.
If you're a tried and true Riding Christ fan, it
Right.
might not be your favorite.
Yeah.
In your book. But for me, I mean, for a music lover, the songwriting is there, the lyrics are there, the mood is there, a lot of melody. If you can get past the name and the fry vocals, definitely take the time and listen to it. And if you're about them fry vocals, you should be listening to this album.
yeah, for sure. Yeah, so there you have it. That's, our list of our mind-blowing metal classics that really made an impact on us. Now, I'm going to go through a few honorable mentions. The problem is with these, I could probably name 25 to 40 of them, but I just picked about the first ones that came to my mind. And like I said, I'll reiterate once again, we probably will go on with this series because I think it's something that's kind of a cool topic episode, and it gives other people that may have not listened to some of these albums a chance to kind of not only delve into kind of, this is why this podcast exists, right?
Sure.
But also like maybe some things that they didn't listen to, or, some ideas of some other music that they could dive into as far as the extreme world, right?
Yeah, and to that point, a lot of people might not have heard any of these albums because they're coming up in a whole new generation.
Yep.
Younger listeners out there that maybe don't know all of the history of music. This would be a good place to pick up, fill in some of the gaps between where things started with Black Sabbath and where we are today with the newest bands that are out. Definitely check out some of these albums if you have the time.
Nice. So here's some honorable mentions to close it off. I'm just going to list mine, and then Nick will list his, and then we'll wrap it up here. So for me, honorable mentions, Deicide, Once Upon a Cross. We're going to go Faceless, Acadelma, Kill Switch Engage, Alive or Just Breathing. That one could be like, it may not be extreme enough for some people, but I just remember the impact that had when I listened to it. Between the Buried Me at Alaska, Shadow of Intent, Melancholy, which is kind of a newer effort, but still one that's on the list of mind-blowing albums. Glass Casket, We Are Gathered Here Today. Black Dahlia Murder, Unhallowed, so basically their first effort. Nevermore, Dreaming Neon Black, such a badass album. And then rounding out the list of just the things that popped off my head, In Flames, The Jester Race, that we've already spoke on. Like I said, I could probably go on and on. I could probably really think hard, look at my CD collection, and name 25 more, but we'll stop there for today as far as honorable mentions.
All right. Some of the best all-time metal albums, especially with respect to it being like an extreme or a death metal album, I'm going to run down this list real quick. Human by Death, Slaughter of the Soul by At the Gates, The Fourth Dimension by Hypocrisy, Of One Blood by Shadows Fall, Dreaming Neon Black by Nevermore, also one of my favorite albums of all time. From Mars to Sirius by Gojira. That was my introduction to that band, and I still think it's one of the all-time best extreme metal albums. As the Palaces Burn by Lamb of God. Silent Circus by Between the Buried and Me.
Oh, okay.
and World Demise by Obituary. I had to throw them in. I absolutely love those guys, and that was probably a latter effort in their first part of their career, but an absolute slapper.
Okay. Well, that wraps up this episode. Thank you guys so much for listening, and make sure you drop us a comment. Let us know your top 5 albums that really shaped you as far as the extreme metal world. And with that being said, drop a like, comment, subscribe, all that good shit. We really appreciate it. Let's keep metal alive. Let's keep this community alive. And with that being said, keep it metal, my friends. Much love.